This is my ranking of games like Vampire Survivors that I've played, based purely on my personal experience. Each one is placed from masterpiece down to trash, depending on how satisfying the progression feels, how chaotic the combat gets, and how well each run keeps you hooked. Let's get straight into the list. DunHero begins with quick dungeon runs, where I pick a class and deal with waves of enemies while building strength along the way. The 28 classes make a big difference, since each one changes how I move, attack, and plan from the very beginning. Combat feels fast and reactive, with constant pressure to dodge, collect items, and shape a build that can survive longer fights. The large pool of items and cards opens the door for many combinations, some turning a run into chaos in a good way, while others struggle to keep up. There are moments where difficulty spikes feel uneven, but runs are short enough that it never drags. With quick restarts and steady unlocks, it keeps a strong loop going. This one ends up in the good tier. Entropy Survivors brings a strange setup where I control a frog riding a sword-wielding mech, and that idea alone makes each run feel different from typical games in this space. The action plays out as a fast twin-stick shooter, with constant enemy waves pushing me to move, aim, and react without pause. Weapons and upgrades get wild, from falling crates to unexpected effects that change how I deal damage or survive longer. Builds come together in unpredictable ways, which keeps each run feeling fresh. The lack of a real story doesn't matter much, since the focus stays on combat and progression between runs. Playing solo already feels intense, but adding multiplayer makes everything even more chaotic and active. With steady upgrades and strong replay value, this one earns its spot in the great tier. Greedland places me on hostile alien planets where I fight through huge swarms using a mix of heavy weapons and quick movement, and it feels very direct compared to other games in this style. I aim, shoot, and control the action myself, which makes every run feel more active instead of relying on automatic attacks. The gunplay stands out, with miniguns, missiles, and other weapons creating loud and chaotic moments as enemies keep closing in. Upgrades help shape each run, though the early progress feels stronger than later stages where things can slow down a bit. Missions feel structured rather than endless, which adds a nice change of pace. Even if repetition starts to show after longer sessions, the moment-to-moment action stays satisfying. This one earns a place in the great tier. Jotunnslayer Hordes of Hel builds around Norse mythology, where I fight through constant enemy waves while shaping a powerful build using different classes and god abilities. Each class changes how I approach combat, from close-range attacks to ranged or defensive styles, and that variety keeps runs feeling fresh. The upgrade system stands out with god skills, class abilities, and reroll options giving me more control over how each run develops. Combat feels intense, especially during boss fights where everything I've built gets tested in fast and demanding encounters. The loop stays engaging because of how many combinations are possible, making each attempt feel different. Even though the maps can feel a bit empty at times, the core gameplay keeps things interesting and active throughout. This one easily secures a spot in the excellent tier. NIMRODS GunCraft Survivor builds around a simple idea where I start with a basic weapon and survive against waves of aliens, but it quickly becomes about crafting stronger and more unusual guns during each run. Every level up lets me change how my weapon works, adding new effects like extra shots, explosive damage, or different firing styles. The system keeps evolving as I unlock more parts, which then show up in future runs and expand the possibilities. What stands out is how even the demo already offers a huge amount of content, with many weapons and upgrades available early on. Runs feel different because upgrades are randomized, and my drone adds another layer by using my previous builds. Even with questions about long-term variety, the core loop stays engaging. This one sits in the good tier. Temtem Swarm mixes the familiar creature-based style with wave survival gameplay, where I focus on lasting longer while building stronger abilities during each run. Each character brings different skills, which adds some variety in how I approach combat and build upgrades. The system encourages planning instead of random choices, giving a bit more direction compared to other games in this space. There are moments where builds come together well, especially during longer runs where abilities start to evolve and cover the screen. Boss fights can feel intense, but the visual clutter sometimes makes it hard to keep track of everything happening. Playing with others adds some fun, though it can also make the chaos harder to follow. While the core ideas are solid, repetition and clarity issues hold it back. This one falls into the mediocre tier. The Spell Brigade focuses on simple movement while spells fire automatically, but the real depth shows up as I upgrade and shape those spells during each run. I collect experience from enemies and choose augmentations that can change how abilities behave instead of just boosting damage. Some upgrades even turn risky effects into useful ones, which makes experimenting more interesting. Enemy types also require attention, since different behaviors can either create problems or be used to my advantage. Playing solo works fine, but the game becomes far more active with a full team, where builds interact and runs feel less predictable. There are moments where the lack of guidance can be confusing early on, but once things click, the loop becomes easy to follow. The chaotic co-op and strong replay value carry it forward. This one rises into the great tier. Tiny Chaos uses short stage-based runs where I clear waves of enemies and build strength through upgrades, but it leans more on simple ideas rather than expanding them in meaningful ways. Each character has different skills, which adds some variety, and the upgrade system can create strong combinations during a run. There are moments where builds come together and fill the screen with effects, making the action feel satisfying for a while. The local co-op option also adds something different, giving runs a bit more replay value. However, progress between runs feels slow, with upgrades taking too long to make a real difference, which affects long-term motivation. Limited content and occasional performance issues also start to show after a few sessions. This one settles into the mediocre tier. Tower of Babel Survivors of Chaos uses a dark fantasy setting, where I fight through floors filled with enemies while collecting experience and choosing random blessings during each run. The visual style stands out right away, with hand-drawn designs that give enemies and environments a strong identity. Combat follows a familiar loop, but the blessing system and gear mechanics add some depth, especially with armor that can shape how I build around certain abilities. Planning around random upgrades keeps runs interesting, even if luck still plays a big role. Character variety feels limited since most share similar abilities, which reduces long-term variety. There are also some control issues depending on how I play, though performance stays stable otherwise. Despite a few limitations, the gameplay loop remains engaging enough. This one fits into the good tier. Achilles Survivor builds around fast survival gameplay, where I fight through waves of enemies while also placing structures that help me stay alive and deal damage. The building system adds something different, letting me set up healing spots, traps, or even passive support that continues working while I move around. This changes how I approach each run, since I'm not only reacting to enemies, but also planning where to place useful structures. There's a good range of characters inspired by Greek mythology, each with their own abilities that shift how combat feels. Progression gives steady upgrades across runs, which keeps things moving forward. Enemy and level variety can feel a bit limited over time, but the core idea stays engaging and fresh. This one claims a spot in the great tier. Karate Survivor takes a different approach where I rely on close-range combat instead of staying at a distance, which changes how I deal with enemy waves right from the start. Attacks depend on positioning and timing, since most moves hit forward and require me to face enemies properly. As I level up, I unlock more moves and can chain them together for stronger combos, which adds some depth to how damage builds up. The environment also plays a big role, with objects I can grab and throw to control crowds or create space when things get overwhelming. Early runs feel tough, until a few upgrades make survival easier, and the pace quickly becomes chaotic once everything starts stacking together. Even with some rough edges, the gameplay loop keeps me coming back. This one lands in the good tier. Magicraft builds around creating powerful magic setups where I experiment with spells, wands, and trinkets to shape each run in different ways. The system allows me to combine effects so spells interact with each other, leading to builds that can behave in unexpected but effective ways. Switching between multiple wands adds flexibility, letting me adapt during fights instead of relying on a single setup. Combat keeps evolving as enemies and rooms become more dangerous, pushing me to refine how everything works together. Visual feedback also helps, since I can clearly see how each spell changes and affects the battlefield. Even though the structure feels familiar, the depth in build creation keeps things engaging across runs. There's always something new to try, which keeps the loop active and interesting. This one stands tall in the excellent tier. Sodaman mixes twin-stick shooting with a soda-based upgrade system where I combine different colors to shape how each run plays out. The idea of building around these soda effects adds some variety. There are enough weapons, augments, and upgrades to experiment with, and some runs can come together in interesting ways when the right combinations appear. The visual style also stands out with its cyberpunk look, which gives it a bit more personality. Some mechanics are not clearly explained, which makes early runs confusing. Even with a solid base, these issues hold it back. This one ends up in the mediocre tier. That's how these Vampire Survivor style games compare after spending time with each one. Some runs spiral into controlled chaos with strong progression, while others struggle to stay engaging, but all of them show different ways this formula can evolve. Thanks for watching!